In just 18 months, a small studio in California built one of the greatest RPGs ever made. It was messy, rushed, and full of chaos, and somehow Fallout New Vegas still became a classic. This is the story of how Obsidian pulled off the impossible, and why we almost didn't. Obsidian Entertainment was born in June 2003, rising from the ashes of Black Isle Studios, one of the most legendary RPG houses of the 90s. The founders, Fergus Orchard, Chris Avallone, Chris Parker, Darren Monahan and Chris Jones, weren't just industry veterans. They were the people behind Fallout 2, Planescape Torment, Icewind Dale, and even worked alongside BioWare on Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Black Isle's closure wasn't a case of creative burnout. It was a casualty of Interplay's crumbling finances. Their ambitious Baldur's Gate 3, The Black Hound, had been in development for over a year before it was abruptly axed. That was the breaking point. The team decided to take control of their own fate, pulling around 100 to 125k of personal savings to form a new studio. They named it Obsidian Entertainment, a deliberate nod to the dark gravitas of their old home, Black Isle. Obsidian's first years were all about survival. Without their own IP, they focused on making sequels to proven hits. The debut project was Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords, for LucasArts in 2004. Development was a sprint, just 15 months, and while the game delivered the kind of layered writing and moral complexity they were known for, the rushed release left it with technical issues and unfinished content. Years later, fans would restore much of what was cut through mods, a stark omen of what's to come in the future. But next came Neverwinter Nights 2 in 2006 for Atari, a project with a bit more breathing room. It reviewed well, and its expansions Mask of the Betrayer in 2007 and Storm of Zahir in 2008 cemented Obsidian's reputation for rich narrative design. But behind the scenes, things were far less stable. Pitched projects kept falling through, leaving the studio financially shaky and dependent on whatever contracts they could land. By the late 2000s, Obsidian had their reputation with two sides: masters of branching quests, complex worlds, and tough moral choices, and equally known for the games launching with a few too many rough edges. Their first original IP, Alpha Protocol in 2010, an espionage RPG, failed to sell despite later earning a cult following. Heading into 2010, the studio was at a crossroads, full of talent and ambition but vulnerable to the whims of publishers. So when Bethesda came calling with an offer to make a Fallout spin-off, the stakes couldn't have been higher. For Obsidian, it wasn't just another job, it was survival. On the other side of the story, in 2008, Fallout 3 wasn't just a hit, it was a resurrection. Bethesda's first outing of the series sold over 5 million copies and pulled the Fallout brand out of history books and back into the spotlight. But while players were still wandering the capital wasteland, Bethesda's core team was already looking ahead of the next giant, the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim. That left a gap, a Fallout-shaped gap, and Bethesda wanted it filled. Rather than build the follow-up in-house, they turned to a studio with the right DNA, Obsidian Entertainment. Todd Howard himself pushed for them, knowing their pedigree with the original Fallout titles and the knack for deep branching narratives. This wasn't just going to be some DLC or expansion, it was going to be a full game. There was just one catch. Well, several catches. Bethesda offered Obsidian a standalone Fallout title, but locked in an 18-month deadline, lightning speed for a massive open-world RPG. Most projects like this had 3, maybe 4 years to bake. The logic was simple. Fallout New Vegas needed to hit shelves well before Skyrim, but still ride the wave of Fallout 3's success, using the same engine and assets. The game wouldn't be called Fallout 4, the marketing would make that clear, but in every other sense expectations were sky high, match Fallout 3's scope and ambition, and maybe even surpass it. Just, faster. And then came the clause. If New Vegas scored an 85 or higher on Metacritic, Obsidian would get a hefty performance bonus. Miss it by even a single point, and the money vanished. No middle ground. It was the definition of high risk, high rewards. Pull it off and Obsidian would earn critical acclaim, secure their finances and cement their reputation. Fail and they'd reinforce every negative stereotype about their games launching too soon and too rough. With the clock already ticking, Fallout New Vegas would need to be built with surgical precision, ruthless time management, and an unwavering commitment to what Obsidian did best. And on paper, Obsidian had a head start. Fallout New Vegas would reuse Fallout 3's assets and the Gamebryo engine. In practice though, that shortcome came with a price and a steep learning curve. Gameplay already had a reputation. Originally built for earlier generation RPGs, it creaked under the weight of what Bethesda had done with Fallout 3. Stability issues and memory problems. Even Bethesda's own team had to wrestle it into shape. For Obsidian, who'd never worked with the tech before, it was like being handed the keys to a car with 3 flat tires and told to drive cross-country. To get moving, they even hired a modder who'd worked extensively with the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. It helped, but bottlenecks kept piling up. Every new system had to sit on top of that wobbly foundation. Havoc physics integration could tank stability, assets needed obsessive optimization, and the Vega Strip itself had to be chopped into multiple loading zones, because the engine simply couldn't handle it as one continuous space. And yet, ambition didn't slow down. The vision was a living Mojave wasteland, with factions locked in power struggles, dense questlines and player choices rippling through the world in unpredictable ways. Project director Josh Sawyer and narrative designer Chris Avallone were clear. This was going to be a writer-led RPG. Forget simple good versus evil morality. Here every choice would have shades of grey, and every faction could be friend, foe or something in between. That vision came with a mountain of work though. By release, New Vegas contained over 65,000 voiced lines of dialogue, enough to earn a Guinness World Record at the time, but scope meant sacrifice. Planned areas east of the Colorado River, including more Legion settlements, were cut. Quest lines were trimmed, entire arcs were structured, in some cases content from the cancelled Aliens Crucible project was quietly repurposed to save time. The pace inside the studio was relentless. Sawyer would later call it tight but not insane. But other team members remembered the reality: burnout, crunch and bug-fixing marathons that stretched into the early hours. By the end of those 18 months, the team had produced not just a Fallout spin-off, but a sprawling faction-driven epic, albeit one barely held together by duct tape, caffeine and sheer narrative ambition. October 19, 2010. Fallout New Vegas hit shelves and ran headfirst into chaos. Anticipation had been sky high, but the launch build was riddled with technical trouble. Crashes, corrupted saves, framerate drops, all too common. On consoles, the PlayStation 3 version fared the worst, sometimes crawling to single-digit frames during heavy combat or crowded areas. PC players weren't spared either. The issues ranged from broken AI pathfinding to surreal animation bugs, the kind where an NPC might spin helplessly to the sky, or a quest line would just stop working. The reviews reflect a strange split personality. On one side, New Vegas was hailed as a triumph of role-playing death, player freedom and narrative ambition. The faction politics, the branching quest lines, the way your choices left a real mark on the worlds, all of it drew comparisons to the original Fallout classics. But every glowing paragraph seemed to come with a warning label. It was a kind of praise that came with a sigh. And those technical issues didn't just frustrate players, they had real measurable consequences. Under contract, as before mentioned, Obsidian would earn a hefty royalty bonus if New Vegas scored 85 or higher. But it didn't matter that critics agreed the writing and role-playing were top tier. The instability dragged the numbers down. 84 on PC and Xbox 360, 82 on PS3. 1 point shy. That single point meant losing out on the financial boost the studio badly needed. For most games, the rocky launch is a death sentence. Fallout New Vegas didn't just survive it, it thrived. Over the years, what began as a buggy, divisive release became one of the most celebrated RPGs of its era. For many fans, it's not just a great Fallout game, it's the Fallout game. A big part of the transformation came from its story. Where Fallout 3 focused on straightforward central quests, New Vegas dropped players in the political tangled Mojave wastelands. But the single biggest reason for the game's long life was its community. Within months of release, modders were patching bugs, restoring cut content, and tweaking gameplay. Game director Josh Sawyer even released his own personal rebalance mods, J Sawyer. Massive fan projects like New Vegas Restoration tackled hundreds of issues Bethesda never patched, and over time the Nexus mod library exploded, adding everything from new weapons to full-scale questlines, even total conversions like Fallout New California. Those fan efforts didn't just improve the game, they helped rewrite its reputation. Broken at launch became refined by fans. The aftermath of Fallout New Vegas was bittersweet for Obsidian. Creatively, it cemented their reputation as masters of player-driven narrative design. Financially, it was a hit they could ill afford. That missed Metacritic bonus stung more than pride. Coming off a string of cancelled projects and tense publisher relationships, Obsidian had banked heavily on that money. Losing it was a reminder of just how fragile the situation really was. This fragility turned into crisis in March 2012 when Microsoft cancelled Stormlands, a major Xbox launch title the studio had been developing. Without that revenue, Obsidian laid off roughly 20 to 30 employees, nearly a quarter of their workforce. For a few weeks, the future of the studio hung by a thread. The salvation came from an unexpected source, the crowd. Later that year, Obsidian turned to Kickstarter with Pillars of Eternity, a spiritual successor to the classic Infinity Engine RPGs they'd once built at Black Isle. The campaign exploded, raising over 4 million and proving the audience was still hungry for the kind of rich, choice-heavy storytelling they excelled at. It didn't just save the studio, it shifted their focus. From then on, Obsidian made owning their own IP a priority, avoiding the kind of publisher dependence that had left them so vulnerable after New Vegas. The lesson stuck. In The Outer Worlds from 2019, they kept the branch narratives and faction politics of New Vegas, but scoped the game smaller to ensure polish. Pillars of Eternity and Tyranny refined their system-heavy storytelling into tighter, more manageable projects, ones that could ship without the destructive crunch and instability of Mojave's development cycle. Now acquired by Microsoft, Obsidian is in far stronger position, now leading titles like Our World and The Outer Worlds 2 set for release in late October. Because in the end, Fallout New Vegas was never perfect. Its bugs, cut content, rushed finish made sure of that. But its heart and ambition have kept it alive over a decade, securing its place not just in the Fallout pantheon, but in the broader history of RPGs.